All right, guys, we're live. I'm live here with a good friend of mine, Dr. Chris Bronson. He's, I would say, I guess, a hormone TRT testosterone expert. He's up in Sioux Falls. He also does some coaching for individuals who are looking. If you're in the Florida area, Sioux Falls area, right? Is that where you're licensed, correct?
Well, we take patients in Florida, Texas, Florida, Texas, Illinois, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Iowa, Wyoming, and I think and Georgia. So,
All right, you're spread out pretty good. And so Chris
yeah.
does a lot of the testosterone hormone replacement therapy, guides you through it, coaches you through it. And I brought him on today to talk more about TRT and testosterone and kind of debunk a lot of the stigmas associated with it and talk about the benefits of it. So I did a couple videos on TRT and testosterone because I see so much dumb nonsense out there. People like kind of looking at it like people who are doing TRT are like ripping steroids and it's like this bad drug. So first of all, where do you think this really negative stigma or perception of the hormone testosterone and especially TRT replacement therapy, where do you think this comes from?
Probably two places. Number one is the fact that in the 1940s and 50s, it was widely believed, and it's still kind of widely believed, that testosterone can increase your risk for things like prostate cancer, blood clots, heart disease, strokes. And so that was based on some early studies. I think that's number one, is there's just a huge concern about the risks of treatment. And then in the 90s, we had that whole baseball performance enhancing drug crisis, if you remember. Well, it wasn't a crisis. It was just like a big political thing where all androgens really got denigrated, but, testosterone included. So testosterone, was made a controlled substance. And so I think for those two reasons, it's just seen as like, it has a reputation as this illicit performance enhancing drug and a high risk one at that. So I think those are the two places where it comes from. As far as people looking down on other people for taking TRT, I mean, I see that most commonly from fake natties on Instagram. A lot of these just guys that, pretend like they don't take anything. Usually they're taking far more than just testosterone, or they're not taking TRT. They're just strictly taking other synthetic androgens and SARMs and things like that. I don't know. I think today it's a lot better, like in terms of the perception of men who use TRT. I think just based on my patient population, it's hormone therapy for both men and women, hormone replacement therapy, if you will, is definitely more popular amongst like the wealthy class in America. It still has a bad reputation amongst like some primary care doctors and just even lay people, but there's a lot of rich people on TRT. I mean, the most notable one is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the current Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's been on TRT for a while. And he looks really good, for being in his 70s, has really good body composition, and, whatever else you want to say about him, he's kept himself in shape into his 70s. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's just more the old dogmas about the risks of hormones and testosterone. And then also, that whole concern. The concern in the 90s was just that, because professional baseball players were abusing androgens. It wasn't just in baseball. It was in every sport. And even to this day, a lot of professional athletes, I think, definitely use androgens illicitly. But yeah, the whole thing was like, about kids are going to start taking testosterone, and they didn't want high school athletes taking it. And it is really bad if, you take androgens when you're young like that. So some of that was justified, but a lot of it was just kind of a witch hunt for. You remember they had those hearings? I don't know if you're quite old
Like
enough.
Mark McGuire, and Mark
Yeah,
McGuire got like slammed for it. But I mean, it makes
yeah,
sense because he was an idolized athlete. People looked up to him, and it kind of makes sense that they had to kind of demonize it, because people would be under the impression that, well, these MLB players and these other athletes, they're very successful, and they got caught taking steroids. And now people are under the impression they were successful because of the steroids,
yeah,
which never made any sense to me.
yeah,
Because
which
most of
definitely
these
isn't true. I mean, it's kept Barry Bonds out of the Hall of Fame
yeah.
unjustifiably, I think. And
Well,
he's, I think, without a doubt, the best baseball player that's ever lived, for sure.
he was. I mean, he was a lot of growth hormone, wasn't he?
I'm sure it was a mix of everything. I think all those guys were using testosterone, growth hormone, and maybe some other things as well. I mean, you look at their physiques, like you look at Sammy Sosa from the 90s, remember him? I mean, they're just very obvious.
Forearms are huge. Yeah.
Yep. And then all those guys blew up pretty significantly after they retired. But Sammy Sosa was really obvious because he developed buccal fat pad hypertrophy. Remember, his face got real chunky. And so testosterone, I was talking about this with a facial plastic surgeon 2 weeks ago down in Chicago, Dr. Ben Coughlin, who does buccal fat pad sculpting, like removal. He makes your cheeks less chubby. And I've sent him a lot of patients who have a history of synthetic androgen use. And that's one of the telltale signs. You look at someone's picture from 10 years before they started steroids, and then 10 years after. All their other fat depots are shrunk, but for some reason, the buccal fat pads can often get bigger, weirdly.
And would a testosterone replacement dosage, as low as they are, cause that, or is that caused by?
Yeah, it could. I mean, over a long period of time. But I see it more often in steroid users, using things other than testosterone. But it does happen.
No,
It happens with age too. So, but it's just a unique thing that is pretty under-recognized as a telltale symptom of androgen abuse.
well, it also kind of seems like there's this really big exaggeration of the performance enhancement associated with TRT. Like, obviously, it's going to help you, but I think people are interpreting it as if it's going to make you almost like a demigod of some sort. Like it's going to completely transform your performance and your body composition and stuff. And from what I've seen, I personally know, obviously I'm here in Florida, you can basically walk into a clinic and get it.
Yeah.
Almost everybody I know is on the treatment, and they all look exactly the same. So from anecdotal experience and people I've coached, it doesn't seem to have a profound effect on you physically, super noticeably. Would you say that's probably true?
For like young, healthy people that are using it non-medically, that's pretty true. There's some evidence of that. They've done studies giving guys just TRT doses of testosterone who are young, otherwise healthy, at normal levels, etc. I think the more metabolically unhealthy you are, particularly as you approach middle age and older. Well, I know that testosterone does have more pronounced effects on body composition for sure. The first thing that it does, even at lower doses, is it starts to reduce your percent body fat. This is one thing I do that I don't think I've ever seen any other so-called TRT clinic. I mean, I don't call my business B3 clinic. We don't call ourselves a TRT clinic. We're really just a men's health clinic. We specialize in treating metabolic syndrome, basically obesity, diabetes, and higher risk patients. But yeah, for those patients, I think it does have a pretty significant body composition effect. And the first thing you notice, it decreases your percent body fat. And then at slightly higher doses, well, sometimes significantly higher doses, it starts to affect your muscle mass. But remember, the people that are going to benefit, unsurprisingly, are the ones who are, more obese, have low muscle mass, have never been on testosterone. If you're otherwise young and healthy, yeah, I mean, it helps a little bit. It definitely helps with preserving lean mass. And pretty much everybody, it can help with that, even at TRT doses. But as far as like performance enhancement and like giving people an edge in sports and things like that, TRT doses are really not going to make all that much, hardly of a difference, and obviously bodybuilders don't ever use TRT doses when they're trying to get their competition physique. So I don't know, that's probably a longer answer than you might have wanted.
I figure they obviously take a lot more than that. And it's almost like, you hear the word testosterone and it gets combined with like bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
So people think TRT and then they think bodybuilder and they think it's one and the same. But, what I explained in one of my videos is, from what I've heard, bodybuilders are taking at least bare minimum twice the dosage of TRT plus other compounds. And that's what, paired with the right genetics and training, results in that physique. 150 milligrams of testosterone is not going to make you look like a pro physique athlete.
No.
Term athlete loosely.
No.
But
right.
But they become like synonymous. TRT has become synonymous with super jacked, ripped influencer. And people look at him and they say, oh, well, he's just on TRT. And so another thing is like,
there's two things about that. So the first thing is, if someone's just on TRT and they're, like a fitness influencer, that can be appropriate. I mean, a lot of those guys, remember, even the fake natty ones abuse steroids. So when they come off cycle, their normal testosterone production is shut down. So being on TRT is appropriate in that case. Mm-hmm. Nobody is going to get a professional bodybuilder physique just from only using TRT doses of testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I would say that's about roughly, 300 milligrams a week of injectable testosterone would be like the upper limit of what I would consider medical treatment. But it's also not medical treatment if you're just giving it to yourself. Like if you don't have a doctor's supervision, even if you're taking 5 milligrams, I mean, I don't think that's safe for really TRT. I mean, that's just, you're just ignorantly abusing steroids without knowing the correct, dose to use.
Yeah, that was one of the comments on my last video, and I thought that was appropriate. I thought that made sense. But they, some people look at it like it's, they, some people, they categorize it as like drug use, like using drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm thinking like, well, there's all kinds of drugs out there. So like, what drug is considered like a good drug? What drug is considered a bad drug? And testosterone is often considered a bad drug, probably for the negative side effects that were believed in the past, that I believe those negative side effects are actually helped by testosterone from what I've seen recently. So,
yeah. I mean, part of it is also, people think that when they think testosterone, they think aesthetics. So they think you're taking this to improve how you look. It's not really associated with medical treatment, but it is a medical treatment. Mm-hmm. I mean, testosterone replacement therapy. So the replacement word comes from the idea that you're replacing or giving yourself something that you don't otherwise have.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a misnomer because that assumes that only people with low testosterone levels can be on testosterone therapy, or that it only, benefits people with low levels. And that's demonstrably false. I mean, you can have normal levels and be on testosterone in some cases and it be completely appropriate and beneficial from a medical standpoint. So it's just associated with like, oh, it's just an aesthetic treatment. So you're taking all these risks just for this vain idea of improving how you look. And so that people see it as like reckless. And then, other people see it as like cheating. Oh, you're not, optimizing your diet and training regimen. And so, you're somehow cheating. I mean, I don't know why the fuck people care outside of like natural so-called bodybuilding contests. Why does anybody care what anybody's on? I mean, it's not. Some people are just in a perpetual competition physique wise with other people online. And
Mm-hmm.
those are usually people with like body dysmorphia and other, like personality disorders and things. Um, you know, so I think it's pretty fucking stupid. It's just, even if it was just an aesthetic treatment, that doesn't mean that people who use it are inferior or cheating. I mean, you'll definitely get way better benefits from testosterone if you do resistance training.
Mm-hmm.
We've tried to force all our patients to do that. We try to send some to you who don't know how to do it.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, it's just old thinking. Like I said, see what the rich people do. Are the rich people, like the rich boomers, are they taking testosterone or not taking it? By and large, a lot of them are taking it or trying to take it, So
So what would be like, who would be a good candidate for it? So if we take out the aesthetic side of it,
yeah.
what could what could it treat? What could it improve?
Well, there's two medically appropriate reasons to be on TRT. I mean, broadly. Number one is if you obviously have low testosterone levels coupled with symptoms that could be due to low testosterone. So like fatigue, sexual dysfunction, loss of early morning erections, especially, is a symptom of people not on testosterone. And then, just like being obese can also be a symptom of having, insufficient androgen levels. So low testosterone, coupled with one or more of those symptoms, especially sexual symptoms, that's what we call hypogonadism. So gonads, testes, they don't produce enough gonadal steroids. It's that's what causes the symptoms. So you treat the symptoms with testosterone. That's the first category. That category is not really all that controversial anymore. The second category, which I like to think I've popularized probably more so than anybody, is using testosterone to treat metabolic syndrome in patients even with so-called normal levels. So what is metabolic syndrome? Metabolic syndrome is a combination of visceral obesity, meaning technically it means you have a lot of fat surrounding your internal organs, which you can only really detect that with body composition scans, right? We have subcutaneous fat that's on the surface that we can pinch, and then we have internal fat called visceral fat. But we also use visceral fat just to describe abdominal obesity because, guys with like huge beer guts, they have a lot of abdominal obesity, but also visceral fat because their omental fat, the thing that lines your abdominal organs, that's a visceral fat depot. So when you have, that kind of appearance, a lot of guys walk around like with balloon shaped bodies these days, especially in the West. So, metabolic syndrome patients can benefit if they, combination of the abdominal obesity plus usually it's a combination of either high blood pressure, abnormal cholesterol. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is, accompanied by high blood pressure and other lab findings showing that your obesity has progressed to the point where you have insulin resistance and a kind of a low grade chronic inflammatory state associated with that. So the reason testosterone helps the first category of patients, obviously, they have very low testosterone levels, so it makes their levels higher. I mean, that's kind of simple. The second category of people, the primary way it helps is by reducing body fat and increasing your skeletal muscle, because your skeletal muscle, is what burns a lot of your blood sugar, right? That's the biggest sink for glucose.
Yep.
So treating metabolic syndrome in large part is a body composition thing, reducing someone's visceral and subcutaneous fat, primarily their visceral fat, and increasing their muscle mass. So it's a combination of the two. Just one without the other is usually not beneficial. I mean, you've probably seen people, maybe not you because you train people to do resistance training, but you've definitely heard of people, oh, I've lost 50 pounds, but they've lost they've lost a huge amount of muscle mass. And that's not good for their metabolism. I mean, you can lose fat mass, but if you lose a ton of muscle, you're not really improving your overall metabolic situation, right? So the thing we see that the biggest sin is in patients who take these like Ozempic drugs.
Yep.
And don't do any kind of weightlifting. They just fucking think that, I'm going to take this drug once a week and it's going to, I'm not going to change anything else, but magically this is going to make me lose fat, and sometimes what they do is they make you so profoundly nauseous and reduce your appetite so much that those patients do lose weight, not despite, but even though they don't do any resistance training, they do often lose weight, but they tend to lose a ton of muscle mass as well. So
I've witnessed that firsthand. Yeah, I had a client. So as you know, where I put my my training studio inside of a med spa where GLP-1s are prescribed, the clients I've gotten so far are GLP-1 clients. They lost a lot of weight, but my God, are they weak?
Yeah.
Below average, it almost shockingly weak. Yep. So guys, Chris told me this in the past, you won't even prescribe GLP-1s unless they're resistance training, right? It's because
no, and I don't even really try to give people testosterone. I mean, if they don't do resistance training, you greatly reduce the benefits if you don't do resistance training. There's no excuse really for people that care about their health, especially men, to not, even women too, to not lift weights. I mean, even you probably have had clients in fucking wheelchairs. They can still
several
do shit with dumbbells and stuff. I mean,
had a client with MS in an electrical wheelchair, and he got so much stronger that he was able to like lift himself. He almost kind of like swung like a chimp into my machines. At first, it was like I had to help him get in. It took like an hour and a half to take him through a workout, getting him into the machines and stuff. After about 6 weeks, he's just like, whoop. His upper body strength got so ridiculously improved, he was swinging himself around like a chimp into these machines. It is that substantial.
I'm sure. And that definitely, that probably greatly improves his quality of life. But it also improves his, longevity. One of the biggest predictors of longevity in men is their strength, not necessarily their muscle mass per se, but their muscle strength, which is obviously related to how much muscle mass you have. But the good thing is, like I was just saying, testosterone improves muscle mass and strength. And that's been shown in many studies. So that's really where the benefits come from, is the body recomposition effects. And like we were saying and talking about, kind of the worse your body composition is, the more you tend to, benefit from it. And that's important because one of the big myths is that, you have to lose weight before you go on TRT. A lot of dumb people, there's even TRT clinics that tell people that. I don't know why. Usually TRT clinics lie about other benefits to try to get more patients. They don't try to reduce their patient population. But that's just a widely believed myth, which I think comes from like bodybuilding forums, because people have this kind of assumption, your side effects are going to be so much worse the more fat you have. And they blame estrogen for that. That's a whole nother story, but Yeah, that's one of the big myths. So first of all, it's very hard to lose fat when you, especially if you have androgen deficiency, like you meet the criteria for hypogonadism. It's going to be hard to actually lose fat without testosterone. So that's the first problem with that myth. But then there's also no reason to avoid it. There's no evidence that fat guys have more side effects than non-fat guys. I mean, and like I said, if you have diabetes and stuff, I mean, it's going to help with all that stuff, especially when you're talking about long term.
What about one of the most common rebuttals to TRT is I'm going to eat well, exercise, and diet, and I can bring up my levels naturally. Why wouldn't I just bring them up naturally? And generally, my response is, you might be able to bring them up naturally a little bit, but are you going to be able to bring them up to the level where you're going to see a significant benefit? And just because your overall testosterone level is increased doesn't mean your free testosterone is increased. So you may be able to bring up your testosterone, but if you don't have adequate free testosterone, it wouldn't even really make a difference, right? So do you think people are able to bring up the levels naturally through diet, exercise, and sleeping better and get the same benefits as TRT would?
The same in the vast majority of cases, definitely not. But I mean, okay, the answer is, like, if you lose a lot of fat, if you're very obese and you become less obese, that will improve your testosterone levels, and that can have benefits. But the thing is, most people with just diet and exercise by itself, nothing else, maybe not you, the people that come to you, but they don't long term tend to maintain that. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're really obese, you have to lose quite a bit of body fat to actually appreciably raise your serum testosterone levels. So yeah, I mean, I would say in most cases, most people who need testosterone would benefit more being on testosterone.
They probably won't do what
makes
they need to do anyway because they haven't done it.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. But the other thing is, our modern environment really works pretty hard against us. This is what my book is about primarily, that's coming out in June, called The Real TRT. I would say our environment is very much designed for us to more rapidly accelerate aging and accelerate the decline that we would naturally experience in our testosterone levels, and even at an earlier age. So we know from at least two major studies. One's called the Massachusetts Male Aging Study, and the other is from what's called the NHANES, NHANES data, that testosterone levels the past few generations have dropped pretty significantly. For example, the average 65-year-old in the early 2000s had about a 20 to 25% lower total testosterone level than even the same aged person about 25 years prior. So that's a pretty significant drop in just a short period of time. They've also done, fancy statistical analyses of the stuff like this, just to see, like, oh, is it because people are more obese? Because obviously obesity is greatly increased in the past, 50 to 100 years. So they're like, well, that just might be due totally and completely to obesity. And it turns out it's not just due totally. When they control even for like body mass and diabetes and other stuff that's known by itself to lower testosterone, they still show drops. So yeah, obviously there's a lot of reasons why we have low testosterone. Definitely metabolic disease and metabolic syndrome is by far the number one cause. But then the follow-up question to that is, why do we have so much metabolic disease? why is metabolic syndrome so incredibly common today, where the obesity rate in the 1920s for US adults was less than 5%.
Whoa.
100
I
years
know that.
later, 100 years later, it's close to like 45%. And it's 20% among children. And
You think,
it was very, very low. The amount of obese children in 1920 was extremely low. So the obesity rate's gone up, skyrocketed. Type 2 diabetes affected less than 1% of adults 100 years ago. Now it's like 15%, and close to 40% have something called pre-diabetes, which means that
it's like
over a
insulin
10-year
resistance,
period,
right?
they're very likely to develop diabetes eventually. So it's really bad, and it's getting worse.
Well, this comment, it said he read plenty of articles blaming modern stressors, bad modern food, microplastics. I don't know about the
Yeah.
whole microplastics thing. I don't know if I'm buying that. But what do you think? What do you think about these? Do you think they contribute?
Yes, I mean, so processed foods. Yeah, you hear a lot of people talk about that. You hear that we were talking about Robert F. Kennedy. That's what he talks about. Processed foods, dyes. Things that are in the things that we eat. That's what's causing people to be obese. That's the most commonly blamed thing. The other, and that's a little bit different from another thing that's very commonly blamed, which is just we have much easier access to calories. Like they're
That's what I'm
cheaper.
thinking. Yeah.
Right. But, so in short, the food supply is poisoned, and we have super dense calories that are available. And then the other thing, microplastics are blamed for endocrine issues, not necessarily obesity, even though obesity is clearly, it's like there's definitely hormonal factors that interplay with, who's more likely to get obese and who isn't. So microplastics, yeah, I think, I mean, look, it's a fact that we do have more microplastics in our environment. Like, people talk about like plastic water bottles, phthalates, which are in like perfumes and other things that we buy, BPA that was talked about a bunch. So yeah, there's a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals that we have in our environment that are really only in America. Like there's a lot of things that are banned in like the European Union and in other countries, for example, that aren't banned here. And that's really due to, US politicians being easily bought off, right, by the plastics and petrochemical industries. So I do think that plays a role in obesity. That's definitely not the primary thing. Another thing that plays a role is just medications. We use more antidepressants; those lower testosterone levels, or can a little bit. More people are taking like NSAIDs, opioids. We have an opioid crisis. Definitely those can cause hypogonadism. So that plays a role. There's like a million things. I think in my book, I talk about what I think is the main reason why metabolic disease has exploded. And it's not necessarily related to processed foods per se. I think it's more related to our light environment, circadian rhythms. So we live a much more indoor existence. We're under artificial lights that's a whole, that's a long discussion. Why would artificial lights cause metabolic disease? And the answer is basically because your eyes, your brain, your skin are all supposed to do certain things internally and at the level of the cell at certain times of day. And your brain and all the cells in your body is synchronized is supposed to be synchronized to the photo period. So sunlight. So the frequencies of sunlight that we get at different times of the day. So what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to wake up in the way that humans live for 99% of existence. You're supposed to wake up in a dark cave, go outside at sunrise, and there's certain frequencies of light that are more prevalent in early morning sunlight that you get on the surface of the earth, that's what's supposed to tell your brain to turn on, various hormone signaling cascades and things like that. And, we've lost that with our indoor existence. The other thing is, like, at night, after sundown, we're in front of, these sewer pipe emitting devices called cell phones and TVs and stuff. So the light frequencies that we're giving our brain at inappropriate times of the day it has cellular consequences and long-term hormonal consequences that I think is really the real underlying driver. I think processed foods and even excess calories. I mean, you know people who are lean with very good body composition. They can eat shit on a shingle, and never and hardly ever gain weight. And then you probably know considerably more people that, I mean, even in a calorie deficit on paper, it seems like it's a struggle, right? So, yeah, all of that I think is hormonal. Whatever is causing it is far more common and unavoidable and insidious than just simply Fruit Loops and Cheerios. Because for the child obesity rate to skyrocket as much as it has in such a short period of time, it's not just the food, it's not just the random plastics and things. It's there's something much more pernicious and unavoidable. And I think the answer to that lies just in the science of circadian rhythms and how, our cellular functions and our overall metabolism is tied into basically light signals.
So, like, that's super interesting. I didn't know any of that, which is sick.
Yeah.
So people are gonna hear that, and they're going to try to create some sort of solution to that. Would you have any recommendations? I know you use the term unavoidable, but we could probably reduce it and improve our cellular health with some different behavioral patterns. What would you recommend?
Yeah, like people ask me, what is the best way to raise your testosterone naturally? Should I take Tongkat Ali or one of these other dumb fucking, Chinese made supplements from scammers that sell them at 5,000% markup? The best way to naturally raise your testosterone levels, honestly, is to take yourself outside, wake up around sunrise, and go outside physically. So not behind a window, not wearing glasses or contact lenses, and expose your eyes to early morning sunlight. Expose as much of your body as you can to early morning sunlight. And by doing that, you're going to be giving your brain the signals that it needs to, basically regulate your hormones naturally.
Wow.
If you wake up, at 6 a.m. when it's totally dark out, and the first thing you look at is a, 1 billion color temperature, blue lit screen, your brain and therefore all the other cells in your body are going to be tricked into thinking it's solar noon when really it's 6 a.m. And then you go work under, fluorescent lights till it's midnight or whatever, long after the sun's gone down. I mean, we just send ourselves because of our light environment, we send ourselves constantly and chronically mixed signals. And so internally that creates a lot of problems and issues. So yeah, early morning sunlight on your naked eye and naked skin for sure. Early morning, so not afternoon. I mean, more sunlight you get, the better, but definitely in the early morning. And then after sundown, wearing blue light blocking glasses. I think orange tinted glasses.
Nice.
That can help too. Also.
What about people who I live in Florida, you live in South Dakota. I personally I have my morning coffee outside on my patio every single day.
Yeah,
Just
that's
because I
good.
enjoy it. But what about individuals who can't do that, who have winter? Is there anything they
Yeah.
can do?
No, see, that's why I said it's just it's really hard to avoid metabolic disease today because of all these, factors, because we live at such high latitudes. Here in the United States, the other problem I didn't talk about with light is we don't get enough UV light exposure, too. And you only get UV light exposure in the afternoon and during summer if you're above the 30th latitude, which most of the country is. So, that plays a role too. But what can you do if your light environment's just not optimal? You can't see the early morning sunrise. I mean, I'll give the answer that there's a guy, Dr. Jack Cruz, who's been talking about this. He's a neurosurgeon and he's pretty fairly famous for talking about it. And this is a very harsh answer, but it's the answer he gives. Oh, if I can't see the early morning sunrise, just make sure you have good term life insurance.
Oh
Because
man.
we have very good evidence that, even like working shift work jobs where you're up in the middle of the night, and you never see any sunrise, and you're around just shitty quality light all day, you have an increased risk of all cause mortality. And that's many studies have shown that. So I don't know what to tell people who can't do that. I mean, it's hard for me in South Dakota too, but I make it work. Even it can be cloudy, it can be overcast, as long as it's, you're still going to get enough. You're still going to get a benefit, even if it's just 5 minutes. Even if
Okay.
you're in a winter jacket, but as long as your eyes are being exposed to it somehow, you don't have to sit there like a moron staring directly at it. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to do that. I mean, it doesn't take much. So even doing it, even if you can't, is still beneficial. And if you work an indoor job, just getting as much sunlight exposure on your naked eye as possible.
So theoretically, people who live in Florida should live a little bit longer.
Theoretically, but what ends up happening is they don't, because why? When it's really hot, people actually spend more time indoors.
That's true. That's
You know,
true. I mean, in the
so
summer here, it's tough.
yeah, so and then they also, be getting into a whole nother conversation. They also, wear these hats and sunglasses. Sunglasses are one of the worst things for you metabolically, by the way.
What?
Yeah. So, like I said, that could lead into a whole different conversation. If people are more interested in that, they should look up that Dr. Jack Cruz, KRUSE, some of his lectures on it.
Okay.
But they're fairly dense though, so it's hard to explain. Or it's hard to, I guess, for the average non-science person to always understand what he's talking about. But, simple enough, just early morning sunlight on your naked eye, and after sundown, get yourself, red tinted glasses.
Wow. Yeah. Shoot. Yeah. Now I'm changing my habits for sure, because I know
Yeah,
when the sun goes down, I probably watch a little bit of TV or YouTube or whatever, maybe like an hour or so. But
yeah,
I
we
feel
all do
like
it.
personally, I leave my blinds open, so when the sun peers in, I wake up naturally, go
Yeah,
outside. When the sun goes down, now it's probably about 7:30. Then I get tired, and honestly, there's a lot of nights where I'm asleep by 9:30.
yeah, that's
So,
good.
I
That's
mean,
good.
it's just kind of natural. But then, like my father actually just came to visit, and up in New York, it's still cloudy, shitty, 50 degrees. You can't really do that. And it's just, there's
Yeah,
got to be
even if it's
something.
cloudy, just Google on your phone when is sunrise at my zip code, and
Mhm.
try to, set your alarm for like 20 minutes after. Try to be in complete darkness and let the first light that hits you be sunlight. Even if it's cloudy, even if it's kind of darker out, if the sun's in the sky and it's in the sky, you're still going to, through the clouds, get, sufficient stimulation. Well, see, the thing that changed everything was when in the last decade they discovered that we have, you might have heard of rods and cones in the eye that are responsible for how we form vision. But they also discovered things called opsins, which are light sensors that are not tied to vision formation. And what they are, they detect certain frequencies of light. So the most well-known one is called melanopsin, and that detects primarily blue wavelength light, or that's like that's the thing that stimulates it the most. And so that's why you hear a lot of this anti-blue block, blue light is bad type of thing. Blue light is not bad if it comes from the sun. But that's the idea, is you stimulate the what they're called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells and those opsins, and that's what sets your cellular machinery in synchrony. That's what synchronizes your cellular machinery, basically.
Okay. So we do have, something that we can do to naturally increase testosterone. That's pretty easy.
That's the best way to do it, I think.
Even better than like diet and exercise?
Well, diet and exercise, sure. The other thing, if the diet wise, the best thing to do, at least for testosterone, is probably like fasting, intermittent fasting. Okay. But, all kinds of diet. See, this is the other reason why I don't think it's the processed foods and the calories. It's the main driver. Is how long have you heard people, you probably rub up against this frequently in the fitness space. How long have people been arguing about what is the best diet? Is it the keto diet? Is it the fucking carnivore diet? Is it the South Beach? There's a million different diets. Is it the Mediterranean diet? That's the one allopathic medicine likes the best. So this is a controversy that's been around for like over 100 years that people have never really been able to come to a consensus on. You'd think that by now we would get very clearly what is universally the exact best foods to eat and what universally do you need to avoid. And that's why I don't think it's been settled, is because really at the root cause of metabolic dysfunction, I think is circadian rhythm dysfunction and excess calorie intake, and processed foods and chemical plastics and things like that are most problematic when you already have metabolic dysfunction, meaning you have mitochondria, the things that are your cellular engines, basically. They're the part of the cell that produces energy. When those do not function as well. So that's what I think causes the problem. So, and another way of saying that is, why are people so fucking fat these days? Is it because they eat a lot and because they consume, a lot of toxic refuse from our environment? Or do they consume a lot of calories because they're metabolically deranged? Like, is it, chicken or the horse before the cart kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at the research that's been done on metabolic syndrome and hormones and circadian rhythm over the past decade and a half, what we're finding is that long before people get clinically obese, they already have pretty significant hormonal and mitochondrial dysfunction. You've heard insulin resistance.
Yeah.
People talk about that all the time. Insulin resistance is actually a pretty late stage complication of metabolic syndrome. And so what happens is you become insulin resistant primarily in your muscle and in your liver before you become insulin resistant in your fat cells. That's a big reason why people get so fucking fat, is because they have insulin resistance first in their skeletal muscle. So their skeletal muscle can't effectively take up glucose. And so it, sits in the bloodstream, and the liver can't do it either as well or as efficiently. So your fat cells just store it, basically.
So, so a lot of what you're eating is just getting shuttled right to your fat.
exactly. But not only can their muscle not take up sugar, it also can't effectively burn glucose either.
Because the
So
mitochondria are fucked.
because the mitochondria in skeletal muscle and in the liver and eventually in your fat cells develop what's called metabolic inflexibility. So you're meant to be able to switch from burning glucose to burning fatty acids, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's called substrate switching. Well, in patients with metabolic syndrome, even long before they develop type 2 diabetes, they don't have the ability to switch between those substrates. And what happens is you get fatty acids that are incompletely metabolized because it's like basically a traffic jam. So this is why obesity and excess nutrients become a problem. It's because you have this kind of traffic jam inside your cell, more specifically inside your mitochondria. It's struggling to burn glucose and burn fatty acids already, and then you're adding more nutrients on top of it that just makes everything significantly worse.
It's got
But
nowhere to go. It's got to
yeah,
go.
so this is the classic thing with seed oils. Like there's this other physician last night. She released a paper in a medical journal. It's about it comes up with hypotheses of the various causes of diseases that are a little bit more unconventional. And there's this big argument. You've heard it about seed oils, and seed oils are terrible. And there's other people saying, seed oils, we have tons of evidence that seed oils are not toxic. They're not dangerous. And I told her, because I reviewed her paper, I think that seed oils are only really a problem when you already have mitochondria that are dysfunctional. So seed oils would not be a problem if you have the ability to efficiently, you have an efficiently running TCA cycle. You're able to efficiently burn fatty acids for energy. And you can't do that when you have metabolic syndrome. And that's why if they become problematic, that's why they become problematic. The way to summarize everything in my perspective is what causes obesity and metabolic syndrome? Is it really a disease of energy excess, right? Where you take in a lot of calories and that's what causes it? Or as is more likely based on everything I've talked about, is it a disease of profound energy loss? So you can't efficiently create energy from the substrates that you take in because your engines are not functioning correctly. Your cellular engines don't function correctly. So it's really what's a way of saying your cellular engines don't function correctly? That means they can't produce energy. Because what are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins? Like if you eat a donut, where does the energy come from in the donut? Well, it comes from breaking down the chemical bonds and the carbohydrates and the proteins and the fats. But eventually all those things get metabolized or reduced to glucose or fatty acids or amino acids. But that's still not itself energy, right? Like calories are not energy. Calories is a unit of potential energy. The energy comes from taking those substrates and really, at the most base level, converting them into electrons. And your mitochondria use electrons to generate energy. So it's not obesity and metabolic syndrome aren't diseases of energy excess. They're diseases of profound energy inefficiency.
So it kind of sounds like it almost sounds like their metabolic rate is so significantly reduced, like the amount of calories and energy that they can even use. And over time, I see this a lot. People, they say they're not really eating more and they're not really eating that much, but they're still probably eating too much for what their body can effectively break down and convert into energy and use it. So you essentially have an individual who they might be eating 1,000 calories a day,
Mhm.
but they can't even use those calories, so it's still effectively too much. And this is where you have people almost, it seems like, starving themselves and still not losing weight. And
Yeah.
it kind of sounds like, yeah, they're just metabolically deranged to a point where even if they are in a calorie deficit, they're still not losing weight because their cells just can't break that substrate down and turn it into energy. So
Yeah,
this,
or they're not losing fat and they're just losing a lot of muscle,
they're losing muscle. Yeah, because a lot
you
of
know,
people
or
don't
they lose
realize
a lot of water and, yeah,
there is a limit to how much fat you can metabolize in a day. And starving
correct.
yourself isn't going to exclusively metabolize fat. It's going to metabolize muscle too and other tissues. So the testosterone as a hormone can improve the cell's ability to metabolize the substrate.
Well, what testosterone does in metabolic syndrome on at 100-foot overview level is what it does is it increases your skeletal muscle
Okay.
and it decreases your fat mass, and it does those things directly. Well, actually, the fat mass part, like we were talking about visceral fat, so that's the fat that's inflammatory. Okay. That's what it does at the big picture. So it reduces your visceral fat, increases your skeletal muscle, and yeah, it increases the efficiency of how your mitochondria function. I mean, you know, how do I get super specific while still being able to keep the layperson? It basically, that's what it does. Yeah, it makes your mitochondria more efficient, and by increasing your skeletal muscle and making it more efficient, that helps your overall metabolism.
So
Yeah,
by
that's
increasing
basically how
skeletal
it
muscle,
goes.
I know that with resistance training, pretty much any exercise, you have mitochondrial proliferation. You actually
Mhm.
add mitochondria. And this
Mhm.
sounds like the resistance training and adding muscle and adding mitochondria. Well, now you've got more efficient engines, and now you've
Yep.
got more engines. So you're
Mhm.
going to metabolize more of that substrate, and you're going to improve your metabolism. So it sounds
Yep.
like resistance training itself is fucking huge for
Yes.
improving metabolic function.
Absolutely. Yeah, and resistance training, even without testosterone, exactly what you said, does have demonstrable beneficial effects at alleviating everything that I just talked about.
Wow.
Ineffective substrate switching, or what's called metabolic inflexibility. Definitely, increasing your body and your muscles need to use energy acutely, yes, is helpful.
Now
Um,
let me ask
yep.
you this: the people on keto and people who eliminate carbs from their diets, the common belief is you turn yourself from a sugar burner to a fat burner, substrate switching.
Hmm.
Now, I guess that would kind of make sense if you don't have any glucose really in your muscle or in your bloodstream. They're going to have to break down fatty acids and
Yeah.
use them for energy for your cells, and you can convert those fatty acids and amino acids into glucose.
Hmm.
Um, but it doesn't, are you really switching from a sugar burner to a fat burner? And people also, they perceive that being that fat burner is coming from your body fat. So that's kind of the whole, from what I've seen, the whole argument for keto diet is now you're a fat burner, not a sugar burner. Do you think that's true? I mean, is keto going to improve metabolic function by completely eliminating like exogenous glucose?
Mm, I mean, I'm not sure in terms of like, that's the one thing I never get involved in is like, what's the best diet? What's the
Yeah,
worst diet? And in theory, yeah, I mean, that's how it will work. Like if you don't, if you consume less carbohydrates, you're going to have to use something for energy.
right.
So I guess it makes sense in a way. The real misunderstanding, though, I think just comes from the fact that people, they think when you have a fast metabolism, that means you burn a lot of calories or you burn them fast, whatever. And that's what makes you not get fat. And a slow metabolism is like the opposite. You don't burn calories fast or you don't burn as much of them, whatever. You don't become fat. But it was like I was saying, calories aren't energy; they're just potential energy. So if you take in potential energy in the form of not carbohydrates, right? So mostly fats and proteins, then yeah, in theory, it should do that, right? Because that's the only available substrate you've taken in. But I still think the main issue is just like, how do we improve the mitochondrial function in our skeletal muscle, liver, and fat tissue? One of those ways, I guess, is through dietary changes.
But it seems the first way is just strength training.
Right. Well, that's a way that's universally beneficial.
Really, yeah.
So resistance training there's almost nobody that resistance training is not going to help metabolically by itself.
Even if you do it fucking wrong, which most
correct. People. Yeah. Well, I mean, even there's some bodybuilders that do it inefficiently or wrong, I'm sure. That's a big part of your
content, really inefficient is what it is. And
inefficient, yeah.
I guess I could pitch my golden era system here, which is going to show you how to contract your muscle, work your muscles really fucking hard with 1 or 2 workouts a week, and you're probably going to get a huge amount of metabolic benefit without having to waste a lot of time doing it. And I think a lot of the reason people don't resistance train is because they think they got to be in the gym all the time doing it. But
that's what I love about you. That's why I send patients to you, because especially with my patient population, they're high earning guys. Like, they work a lot. They don't have the fucking time to be in the gym 5 days a week for an hour and a half. And it really, that's what I love about your content too. It does not take as much as people think. And more is definitely not better. More time is definitely not better.
No. And I've seen, I even saw Jeff Nippard, about a month ago, published a new study. Okay, we've known this for 30, 40 years. A couple of resistance training workouts per week gives you the majority of the benefit. And adding additional workouts on top of that provide a very marginal, if any, return on your time investment. So it seems that we are making a shift to where people are like, okay, you can get all these benefits and you don't have to be crushing it for an hour every single day of the week. And which is great because, like you said, we have a huge metabolic health issue.
Mm-hmm.
And a very simple solution to it, which doesn't take a whole lot of time, is relatively safe if you do it correctly, which is resistance training, even outside of the TRT thing. But this leads me to another question. Okay, would it be this question here? I mean, would it be appropriate to take testosterone if you already have normal levels? And is it detrimental in the sense that you'll reduce your natural levels over time? A lot of people are concerned that it won't bounce back if they decide to get off of testosterone.
Yeah.
So what's your thought on this?
My thoughts are, if you have normal body composition, you're already fit, you don't have metabolic disease, and you have no symptoms that could, your libido isn't really low and your erectile function isn't low, and your testosterone levels fall within the so-called normal range, then you probably the medical benefits of testosterone are probably not outweighed by the potential long-term risks in that specific person. So the reason why medically you would take testosterone if you have normal levels is simply because you can benefit from a metabolic standpoint. And like I said, that's why the myth of, oh, you're fat, you shouldn't be on TRT is so stupid, because that's when you benefit the most. Is when the more metabolically unhealthy you are, the more benefit that you'll get from it. It's just that simple. Mm-hmm. If you're a young guy, especially if you're under 25, you really need to try to stay away from testosterone at all costs. I mean, even if, I've seen guys in their 20s with low testosterone levels, like that technically meet the criteria, but I almost never will put them on testosterone. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them is, it's not something oh, I'm going to be on TRT, then come off. No, TRT is a lifelong therapy. Once you're on, that's it. You're on it for life. It's not, I'm going to take this and then get off it. That's what people do with those GLP-1 drugs, Ozempic and Mounjaro. Those are drugs you take it for a year and a half or whatever. You get to the max dose, stay on it for whatever the trials use. I think it was about 72 weeks. And then, maybe you can get off of them. And there's, some evidence that that'll be a lasting thing. That's not that with TRT, the idea is a lifelong therapy. That's why I don't like putting young people on it, because then you make them dependent on something lifelong. The other reason I don't like putting young people on it, particularly if they're under 25, is your brain's not fully myelinated until you're, adult males, their brains aren't fully developed till about their mid-20s. So, and especially their frontal lobes aren't fully developed. So all androgens, steroids, all the anabolic steroids that are abused, and even testosterone can definitely interfere with brain development. They interfere with something called neurite outgrowth. So, among other things. So that's why those are the two big reasons I try to avoid it in young people, lifelong dependence issue and, just that whole brain development thing. So, but when you get on TRT, it's something, this year in your brain, it should be, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing till I'm in a box, basically.
What would be, so you say taking it a little bit too early interferes with brain development. What would be negative side effects of interfering with brain development?
Well, your frontal lobes just don't develop normally. So you're basically a low, you may not be as intelligent as you otherwise would have. You may not have as good of executive functioning. It's kind of more theoretical. I mean, because we've never tested a group of 20-year-olds with low testosterone level, given half of them testosterone, half of them not, and done rigorous like IQ testing and things like that. That'd be an unethical.
It'll never happen. Yeah.
To do. Yeah. So, so we don't know. So it's mostly more theoretical, but that those are in theory. That's what could happen. Okay. And just anecdotally, for what it's worth, I've seen a lot of bodybuilders. And how do I put this gently?
They're dumb.
The one, yeah. I guess I don't put anything gently. Let's put it to you this way. The ones that abuse high doses of androgens and earlier in life, you can kind of tell in a lot of cases their cognition isn't quite normal. And perhaps that was a pre-existing thing. And that's, people that use illegal drugs tend to have, problems in the way that they think and how they manage and assess risk and things. So that could be a pre-existing issue. But I'm not saying all bodybuilders are stupid, or even that all or even most people that use steroids are stupid or low IQ. That's obvious. That's not the case at all. And I love those guys. But that being said, I mean, you can tell, like the guys, I've been taking this since I've been taking 1,000 milligrams of testosterone since I was 16 years old. You see them when they're 35. I mean, they just, I feel like it definitely has some effects, but can I prove it? I guess I can't.
Yeah, it could be the chicken or the egg again, because, is it the individual who, maybe they're already kind of low IQ, so they take risks like that and they start, using stuff like that at an early age, and then it kind of turn out that way.
Yeah.
So most bodybuilders I've met were pretty smart. But
same with me. I love them. I love that population just because, they're my type of guys, not complainers. They typically are high agency type of people. But they're also stubborn, and it's just to make a point. Yeah, that's why TRT clinics who really make a practice of treating young men with normal body composition, I think they're just doing them a disservice. That's not to mention the fact that, since we don't know the long-term risks of TRT, and no, we don't. I mean, people are going to say that they do. I bet you in the comments of this video, ignorantly, but we don't. We don't have like 30-year studies, that are well controlled, well designed, looking and seeing at, do people that start TRT have a slightly increased risk of strokes and heart attacks later in life? I mean, we don't have that. So everything, in medicine, that's why, like you're asking me, when can you go on testosterone if your testosterone levels are normal? The real straightforward answer is if the potential long-term benefits outweigh the likely long-term risks. And in someone with normal body composition, so in other words, we can't make your body composition more healthy with androgen therapy because it's already in a healthy range, right? If we can't make it better and it's already optimal, then really, all we're doing is giving you risks without appreciable medical benefits. I try to only give people drugs that I think are going to keep them alive longer or improve their quality of life. At the very least, is not going to increase their risk of dying early. So that's why my approach differs. It's not about, oh, you have to meet these certain levels and you have to have exactly this number, and if you don't, you can't be on it. No, it's more like, what is the potential long-term benefits? What's the potential long-term risks? The only time young people, I put them on testosterone, like people, 25 or stuff like that, is a lot of those guys, I see people that have abused steroids, and so they cause themselves to be hypogonadal. So then it is appropriate, right? Because they've already made the decision. And I mean, they're not going to, if you've been on a gram of tests since you were 16 years old, it's not like, when you go off at 26, like suddenly, oh, everything's just going to go back to normal like that. I mean, you're going to need some type of medical therapy. So that's the exception when, your other drug use has shut down your own ability to produce it. But for the average adult, non-steroid user, it's like, what are the potential metabolic benefits you're going to get from it? And do those outweigh the fact that we mostly don't know what the long-term risks are?
But aren't there other benefits outside of metabolic benefits? Improvements in mood and energy that, maybe things.
Yeah, but the evidence on that is far more mixed for people who have so-called normal testosterone levels. So the concept of normal testosterone level is, in our society, is very misleading. I have a video on that and the truth about normal testosterone levels where I go into that, but we don't have good study and research evidence because the fact is we don't typically do studies with testosterone on people with so-called normal levels. It's just assumed that you have to have low levels in order to benefit, which is not true, but not universally true. And so since that's what is assumed by mainstream allopathic medicine, those are the only types of people that get studied. And so, we just don't know. In people who are hypogonadal, so they do have low testosterone levels, yeah, testosterone does non-consistently improve people's sense of well-being and improve their fatigue and stuff like that. But it in other patients, I mean, it's kind of like this: like the lower your testosterone levels are, and the more shitty you feel, the better you're probably going to feel with testosterone. Like the magnitude of the improvement in how you feel, it will be more profound. But that's why the TRT clinics that advertise that this is going to universally improve your libido and sexual function, universally improve your fatigue. That's just not true. Like people will come and think that testosterone is like this combination of Prozac and Adderall, like some supercharged antidepressant. It's just, and I think the vast majority of men do feel better on testosterone, but is it like a life-changing thing where they go from totally unmotivated and like, I mean, it's like anything, like even with antidepressants, like is any drug really going to fix the fact that you have a shitty job that makes you stressed out, and you have a terrible boss, and your wife is 350 pounds and you're not attracted to her anymore? I mean, it's not going to fix those things, right?
Mhm.
So consistently in the studies, is it shown that TRT just universally improves fatigue, universally improves how people feel? The answer is sadly no. And it's not even universally shown that it improves those things even in people with low levels. Obviously, there's more evidence for people with low levels, but yeah, it's not like this magical thing at all.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say not universally. The biggest thing it does is improves your body composition. That, from a metabolic standpoint, that's the best that it does. It increases your muscle mass, reduces your especially visceral fat mass, and does those things in tandem, which is going to be metabolically beneficial. Also improves your bone density. But even on that, we don't know is that really a long-term beneficial thing, that it improves your bone density. People would say, well, why wouldn't it? Well, I mean, there's a few studies that show that actually men on TRT have an increased risk of fractures later in life, which was super surprising to the researchers. And it wasn't like a huge increase, but it was statistically significant. So even though we know cellularly testosterone improves your cortical bone density, does it reduce your risk of fractures? Because that's really what we're worried about with aging people. It's not, I mean, their bone density is obviously related to their fracture risk, but the outcome that we're really concerned about is, do you get hip fractures? Do you get, do you fracture your femur more easily? Things like that. And the minimal evidence we have is that although testosterone increases your bone density, it may not reduce your risk of the meaningful outcomes. Those studies, I think if they used injectable testosterone at higher doses, they find benefit. And it may be that TRT patients are just more active, so they're more at risk for injuries, and so that could be a confounding variable. But just that whole bone density thing that I explained should give people pause. Like, we don't, the way that things work on paper, or even the way we know they work mechanistically, doesn't always translate into the outcomes that we would think. Another example of that is there's a lot of supplements and even some drugs like enclomiphene that will raise your testosterone levels. They consistently do raise your testosterone levels in most people. But despite the fact that they raise your testosterone levels, they almost universally never show a benefit in changing your body composition in the same way that testosterone does, straight testosterone. So that confuses a lot of people because they think, well, this drug makes my testosterone levels higher. Why doesn't it do the exact same thing as testosterone? And studies consistently show that they do not. There's obviously other things at play and other factors that are not being considered. Is the benefit of testosterone therapy really that it raises your level from 300 to 800 or whatever? Is that where the primary and only source of the benefit comes from? I think it probably isn't.
What about, so one more thing I wanted to talk about, peptides. So it seems that some peptides like Sermorelin can provide a lot of the benefits of testosterone without having to kind of be on it.
Sermorelin, Testosterone. Yeah, there's very specific Well, anyway, I'll let you finish your question. What was the question? Can you?
Well, I guess from like the aesthetic perspective or the changes in body composition. We've got a doctor down at the med spa who prescribes like the GLPs and stuff like that, and she's been recommending and using Sermorelin on her patients for improvements in body composition, increases in lean muscle mass instead of testosterone, because people go to her and they want to take TRT for that reason. But she she believes that sermorelin or other peptides might actually be better and safer.
Well, better, definitely not in terms of muscle gain. Sermorelin in particular will definitely decrease your visceral fat, which does have metabolic benefits. So that specific peptide does work and does have metabolic benefits. The issue is it as good? Like sermorelin probably does melt your visceral fat faster than straight up TRT does. But the thing TRT does way better than sermorelin is support and increase your muscle mass.
Okay.
So you need both of those things. And testosterone does reduce your visceral fat. It turns out the way that testosterone reduces your visceral fat, by the way, is through estrogen. So if you take estrogen blocking drugs like aromatase inhibitors, aromasin and astrazole, you don't get anywhere near that same metabolic benefit, because a lot of the, especially fat burning and insulin sensitizing benefits of testosterone come from estrogen. They don't come from testosterone directly. So that's an important point. But the answer about sermorelin versus TRT is going to just be a far more tenable, long-term, lasting treatment. Because even though sermorelin does melt visceral fat, tesamorelin as well. I mean, there are clinical trials showing that. And I've seen that, obviously. You get a rebound effect when you stop it. So most visceral fat, at least in the trials, that you lose with sermorelin, tesamorelin, you'll regain.
Oh.
And that people will say, well, I'll just stay on it for life. Well, there's far less safety evidence long-term for those drugs than there is for testosterone. And those drugs, are in the GH pathway. They're not androgens. So what is the GH pathway associated with? Potentially neoplasms, cancers, things like that. So the theoretical risk of those drugs super long-term is very much in question. And there's that rebound effect that I talk about. And there's the muscle building effect. The testosterone is going to far and away be better at increasing and maintaining your muscle mass. And also the other thing is TRT does have a growth hormone effect, also due to estrogen, by the way. Most of the effects of TRT on the brain are estrogen effect. Most of the beneficial effects are estrogen effects. So you can actually, if you take aromatase inhibitors, you don't get as much of a GH increasing effect. But those peptides that work in the GH pathway, you can already get a lot of those benefits already from testosterone, just if that's well managed. So it's not like an ineffective, useless drug. It's just a cost benefit thing. And, the long-term risk is definitely not as well known. And yeah, I just think TRT is going to be way better for most people who would otherwise qualify for sermorelin. Who would be an ideal sermorelin patient? That'd be someone with a lot of visceral fat. That'd be someone with metabolic syndrome. Those patients almost universally will do better long-term on TRT than sermorelin.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
why do doctors in some clinics like those peptides better than TRT?
Easier to prescribe?
Easier to prescribe. It's not a controlled substance.
Oh.
And the idea that it's just less risky. But
there's no evidence of that, though.
There's no evidence of that.
Yeah, though.
I mean,
find out at some point. It ain't gonna be me, but someone will.
No, but and I don't knock, like peptides like sermorelin, those work. I've used them, but it's very rare that I'll use it. I just, TRT is usually a better starting point. TRT and the GLP-1 drugs together for most obese men is going to be, and resistance training, that trifecta, and adequate protein intake. Those four things together are usually pretty life-changing. If people can be reasonably disciplined, those things work. that combination works for the vast majority of people. So like that's the other thing with the GH secretagogues and other peptides is where do those really fit in the era of GLP-1 drugs, right? Because GLP-1 drugs also reduce visceral fat, and they also, I mean, they definitely reduce subcutaneous fat. So you get the aesthetics that you're looking for with the medical benefits. And then when you add TRT into it, then you preserve your lean mass and even increase your lean mass. It's like a multifaceted approach that leaves, I think, little room for expensive peptides. I mean,
no additional benefit.
Right. It's just like, no, not much of an additional benefit, unknown risk. And it's just TRT is going to be better in the majority of those patients. And definitely if you have low testosterone levels, sermorelin's not going to be the choice.
It makes a nice upsell for a clinic, though.
It does. And that's why they sell them. Yeah. That's why I don't call myself a TRT clinic. TRT clinics are associated with low quality healthcare providers, which is that is a fact. A lot of them don't know what they're doing. And it's just like people are interested in it. There's a lot of money in hormones, but that attracts unscrupulous, unqualified people who either, in most cases, have a Dunning-Kruger effect. So they think it's way more simple than it actually is. But hopefully people hear some of the nuance and what I'm talking about is it actually is quite complicated. So it's not like I can just be a nurse practitioner directly out of my training program and take a weekend course and now I'm an expert on prescribing testosterone to people, a lifelong therapy, that affects profoundly pretty much every cell in your body. I mean, it's not an amateur's game. But sadly, you will get amateur level care at the vast majority of so-called hormone clinics. I mean, it's already what I do is on the edge. It's not on the edge of evidence-based medicine. I think it's definitely evidence-based, but it's already too scary for like your primary care doctor. It's already, you're like most endocrinologists wouldn't necessarily agree with my viewpoints. That doesn't make them stupid and me a genius or me having I found a secret that's well hidden. And it just, two reasonable people can come to two different conclusions. But the problem is when you're a physician, you're dealing with people's life on a short and long-term basis. So the risks of being wrong are much higher than, say, two mechanics who have different methods for fixing a radiator or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? So I guess that's what I'm saying. Like the more outside of standard medicine that you operate, the more knowledgeable and the stronger your grasp of basic internal medicine must be. Because when you operate outside of guidelines, you're kind of, you're on your own pretty much. So you better know what you're doing. And most TRT clinics absolutely do not know what they're doing.
Oh shit. Well, there you have it, guys. If you're looking for a TRT or hormone therapy, Chris Bronson, he's your guy. Where do you operate again?
So we several different states, but our website is b3clinic.com. And it's just, we just have a simple form you fill out, and then we mail you instructions. But we're in Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Nevada, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, Texas, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. So if you're there, we can see you. But yeah, b3clinic.com. I don't have many. I think last I checked, I have room for maybe 10, maybe just under 10 patients. So because I'm doing writing and other things, I don't, once my patient panel's full, that's it. I mean, we may get another doctor or a PA that I train, after several months. But yeah, for me personally, I don't have many slots. So especially if you're a guy in your 40s, 50s, and you have metabolic disease, that would be, the hard cases are the ones for me. The ones that people who want to get on TRT, who are just standard. I have really bad sexual dysfunction, and I know my levels are low. Just start with your regular primary care doctor. That's going to be the cheapest. Coming to me is going to be expensive. Going to a TRT clinic is going to be a hassle, going to be expensive, and you're probably going to get shitty care anyway. So, but if you're one of those more complex people, definitely, we're good. So yeah, b3clinic.com. And then my book is coming out June 24th. It's called The Real TRT, The Myths, Lies, and the Real Science of Fixing Men with Testosterone. So I'm excited for that. There's some last minute work and diagrams and stuff we have to get polished, but yeah, that's coming out in June. And yeah, thanks for having me.
I'll be sharing that, man. Yeah, I'd like you to come on again, maybe weekly if you can. But
Love it. Yeah, I'd love to do something like that.
There's just so much shit to talk about. We just scratch the surface. Yeah, everything you said about the circadian rhythm and all, Chris has got a lot of knowledge, guys. So, make sure you stay subscribed. I want to have Chris on once a week, and we'll talk about the medical stuff. We'll cover a lot of this stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate you.
You're on TikTok too, right?
Yep. TikTok, C Bronson MD. And that's where most of my content is. I'm also on YouTube, same handle, C Bronson MD. So yeah, in both places. And the YouTube, we're kind of polishing that and we have some new, more long form educational videos. Fucking TikTok is trash. I hate TikTok, but
I barely use it.
That's a platform that I built up my biggest audience on. Unfortunately, they restrict me all the time because they think I'm selling steroids. Fucking morons.
Well, we'll get you more eyes on my channel.
Yeah.
You're teaching me a lot, man. There was so much fucking shit that I didn't even know that about.
We only scratched the surface.
Yeah, guys. So yeah, stay tuned. We'll have Chris. Maybe we'll do this as like a Friday thing. If we both got time every Friday, we'll sit here and we'll just.
Hey man, that works for me.
Stuff that not only they don't know, but I don't know. Super interesting.
That works for me, brother. Good to see you.
Guys. All right, like, subscribe. Hit the bell so you can be notified when Chris is back on, and give you as much information as we possibly can to help you guys get more fit, healthier, better shape, and have long, healthy, active lives. See you later.